Welcome to AP World History Modern Podcast, topic 4.2, Exploration, Causes, and Events. The essential question for this topic: what were the causes and effects of the state-sponsored expansion of maritime exploration? By the end of the podcast, and after you read our text, you should be able to answer that question. Let's go over some overall themes, breaking it down with causes and effects. A cause that you're going to learn in this topic: there's improved navigation techniques. What's the effect of this? The Italian cities with ports on the Mediterranean, they're going to create a monopoly on European trade with Asia. They're going to lock down the Mediterranean. Another cause is the Italians controlling access to trade routes. What does that mean in plain language here? The Italians are locking down the trade routes, and they're going to shake everybody down. Anything coming through the Mediterranean, they're going to get a piece of the action. They're going to wet their beak, as they say. And the shakedown in the Mediterranean, you can ask my cousins in Malta, it's alive and well in 2019, so it hasn't gone away. But the historical thing here with the Italians controlling access to trade routes, indirectly, they're going to change world history. This is a major reason Christopher Columbus is going to cross the Atlantic Ocean. I'm not getting into the politics of Christopher Columbus here, but it's not that inner desire to explore. These guys are trying to make money. And one way to do that is we got to get around the Mediterranean. Because of this Italian shakedown, how can we access India and China? How can we get into those markets? How can we start making money without this Italian shakedown in the Mediterranean? Well, one way to do that is to find a different way to access India and then China. So they're going to try to find a way to go around Africa. So understand the incentive here. It's money. It's all, it usually is money, right? All right. Our first topic, okay? The role of states in empire building. So if you're taking notes, circle that, underline it. Let's talk about that for a minute. European states are seeking ways to expand their authority and control resources in this era of empire building. Number one, collection of taxes and new trading opportunities. Number two, material wealth, particularly silver. Number three, conversion to Christianity. Those three, the last one, you make up your own mind. But if you read primary documents, if you read peer-reviewed academic work, journals, books, etc., you tell me what the main priority was. Read Conquest by Hugh Thomas. Read People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. One of the primary documents with Columbus, with Diaz in 1519. You tell me what the main priority was. But those are the three. There's a system here. You should have learned this in maybe 9th grade U.S. history, or actually in middle school. Mercantilism. Let's just for a minute talk about mercantilism. It's an economic system. It develops in Europe during this period, all these new monarchies. Mercantilism is like a relationship between a mother country and a colony. The colony kicks back money to the mother country. It's also, trade with other countries should favor the mother country. And I just want to give you some underlining principles of mercantilism. And we can number these. So under mercantilism, you got number one, the belief that the amount of wealth in the world is relatively static, meaning like, there's only so much. Here's a pie. There's only so many slices, you can get out of this pie. The belief that a country's wealth could best be judged by the amount of precious metals or bullion it possessed. Number 3, the need to encourage exports over imports as a means for obtaining a favorable balance of foreign trade that would yield such metals, that they were looking for. Number 4, the value of a large population is a key to self-sufficiency and state power. 5, the belief that the crown or state should exercise a dominant role in assisting and directing the national and international economies to these ends. As such, mercantilism developed logically from the changes inherent in the decline of feudalism. So this rise of like strong national states, this is going to be like a development of a world market economy. That's something, it's relevant today and still in the news. Even, President Trump, I'm not trying to be political here, but just the fact that that's an issue. And one of the things President Trump talked about when he was running for president against Senator Clinton, China and trade was a big issue, right? So I'm just making that point that it's still an issue today, trade balance, or in some cases, imbalance. Okay, so and the other thing with mercantilism, if that can be easily, a 3-hour lecture in your economics class in undergrad. But if you go on YouTube, there's good little 5-minute videos that shows you some visuals on mercantilism. It's trying to have some knowledge on mercantilism. I know the book barely scratches the surface, but if you have a decent idea on mercantilism, visuals are good to understand it. It comes up a lot. Okay, our next topic. You can underline this if you're taking notes, circle it. Expansion of European maritime exploration. In no nation were the interests of the state and the interests of explorers as closely tied as they were in what country? Portugal. And we're going to talk about a couple of Portuguese explorers. Now, your book mentions Prince Henry the Navigator. We talked about him in the last podcast, so I'm going to skip over that. Remember that guy? Prince Henry the Navigator in one sentence. More sizzle than steak, that's for sure. But let's talk about a new guy, Bartholomew Diaz. I know his name's pronounced and spelled differently. We'll go with Bartholomew. Make sure you understand the difference between Diaz and the next guy that I'm going to talk about, because they get confused a lot as to what they accomplished. Bartholomew Diaz, he's going to sail around the southern tip of Africa. And just a side note, I know the book, and a lot of history books say this, the southern tip of Africa, they always talk about the Cape of Good Hope. The Cape of Good Hope is not the southern tip of Africa. Okay, Africa is a continent. And the country in the southernmost region of Africa is South Africa. And the southernmost tip is actually Cape of Agulhas. It's not the Cape of Good Hope. Is directly south of Cape Town. It's a kind of peninsula. But just for what it's worth, if you're doing a DBQ, try to avoid that. The southernmost tip of Africa is Cape of Agulhas. Check Google for the spelling. I'm not sure how to spell it. But anyway. Diaz, what he's trying to do is what a lot of these guys are trying to do. How do we avoid this Italian lockdown and control of the ports of the Mediterranean? How do we get around the Italian shakedown, right? And they're literally trying to go around it, literally and figuratively. And Diaz, it's not a failure what he does. He does get around the southern tip of Africa, and he just starts creeping up the eastern coast of Africa, but then he kind of bails and he comes back. He never actually makes it to India. One of the reasons was his crew was going to mutiny. They were not happy, so he heads back. But what he did do, he did show and he did pave the way for access to India and China and trade to get around this Italian shakedown in the Mediterranean. And he is Portuguese, just like Prince Henry the Navigator. But then the guy that kind of drives it home, he kind of takes the baton from Diaz, if you will, is a guy named da Gama. Okay, Vasco da Gama. Also Portuguese. Da Gama is the first European to reach India by sea. His initial voyage to India, 1497 to 1499, he's the first to link Europe and Asia by an ocean route connecting the Atlantic to the Indian Oceans, and then the West and the Orient. This, for some reason, it gets, confused a lot or misrepresented, where students think it's Diaz. It's not Diaz. It's da Gama. Not trying to discredit what Diaz did, but he did turn back around. Never made it to India. Make sure you understand the difference. But both of these guys are Portuguese. So da Gama, his discovery of the sea route to India was significant and opens the way for an age of global imperialism and for the Portuguese to establish a long-lasting colonial empire in Asia. Now, Portugal was never going to be the next Mongol empire. They were never going to be the largest land-based empire. But the thing about being a maritime empire, you don't need to do all that. You just need to control the ports. Because this is a maritime empire, the trade, and they're going to do that. This ocean route that the Portuguese discovered, now they can avoid sailing across the highly disputed Mediterranean, besides the Italian shakedown and buying goods and, them, kicking it back on every item that's bought, kicking it back to the Italians. It was dangerous. You go around the Arabian Peninsulas and such, they could avoid all that stuff by this new access to India, and it would be to China. So da Gama, he lands in India in 1498. He claims territory as part of Portugal's empire. The Portuguese ports in India were a key step in expanding Portugal's trade in the Indian Ocean. So make sure you know that. So a lot of this stuff could be valuable in the DBQ. There's a famous DBQ that comes up all the time in AP training courses about Portuguese trade and filthy peppers, and you might come across that one. So this could be good stuff for the contextualization and taking a shot at that complexity point. Okay, if you're taking notes, let's have a new topic here. The Portuguese in Southeast and East Asia. Circle it, underline it. Let's talk about this for a minute. Portuguese in Southeast and East Asia. The Portuguese had superior ships and weapons compared to other Europeans. The Portuguese are going to win control of both the African and Indian coast, and they're going to reach China. The attempt to convert the Chinese didn't really go so good. Do you remember the scholar gentry when we learned about China? They considered the Portuguese like barbarians, okay, dude, all of our religious beliefs are wrong. Your religious beliefs are right. We should think like you, and we should be like you, and we should adapt your religion. Yeah, I don't think so, bro. So the Chinese weren't really into the whole conversion thing. Okay, so let's go to another topic. Circle this, underline it. Trading post empires. The Portuguese construct a series of forts stretching from Hormuz in the Persian Gulf, and they could connect the Gulf of Oman to the Arabian Sea. If you Google map that, you'll see, and you'll see like a strait, and the strait's easier to control because it's where the water narrows. Actually, Detroit is a French word meaning strait, by the way. Some local history for you. And they're going to go to Goa in western India, and to Malacca, and to the Malay Peninsula. It's just south of Thailand. So they're going to control all these ports. So the Portuguese, they're not doing the whole Mongol thing. We don't need to conquer all this land. We're just going to focus on the ports. We're going to focus on where the money is. And we're going to control this trade. These forts are going to give Portugal a global trading post empire. And that's a major key term in our textbook and with the College Board in the CED, Global Trading Post Empire. That's Portugal, right? You wouldn't really say that to them about the Mongol Empire, but the Portuguese, absolutely. This is an empire that's based on small little outposts rather than control of large territories. If you remember in U.S. history class, maybe you could compare similarities and differences here. Remember after the Haitian Revolution, maybe you learned about a guy, Toussaint Louverture, and then Napoleon's Thomas Jefferson wants to get access to the tip of Louisiana and New Orleans, and Napoleon's like, man, take the whole enchilada, bro. You can have all of it, for a song. The port was where the money was, right? But then after they lost all their money in sugar after the Haitian Revolution, didn't really have any value to Napoleon. So that's something you may have learned, hopefully, like in U.S. history or something. But anyway, our next topic, circle it, underline it, Portuguese vulnerability. The Portuguese also succeed in global trade for several decades, so they're going strong. But, right, what goes up must come down. What do all empires have in common? All empires fall. Portugal, it's a small nation. Like, look at a map. You look at Spain, look at Portugal. They don't have the workers. They don't have the ships necessary to enforce all this stuff. They almost got, they got too big, right? They can't control everything that they're kind of running, right? They can't support it. Many port traders, they're ignoring their own government, and they're just going into business for themselves, man. They're just trading independently, and they're ignoring things they're supposed to be doing. And this is messing with the cash of the Portuguese government. You're getting corruption of government officials. So we've seen these themes before. Nobody's watching the store, and you're getting robbed. So by the 17th century, Dutch and English rivals are challenging the Portuguese in East Asia. The Dutch attempt to monopolize the spice trade. As a result of the Dutch doing this, the British, they're starting to focus on India. The Portuguese are going to end up getting pushed out of South Asia. So they got the jump on it, and they were doing good for a while, but eventually these bigger countries are going to bully them out of there. It's like by the 17th century, you're going to see Dutch and English. They're going to be seriously challenging the Portuguese in East Asia. In the early 16th century, the Portuguese go to Japan to trade. They also bring Christian missionaries there in 1549. And they try to form these large Catholic settlements in Japan. The Japanese were so appreciative of this Catholic conversion, attempted Catholic conversion, that they outlawed Catholicism and they expelled all the missionaries. So Catholicism is actually expelled. So the Japanese weren't very interested. Okay, the next topic. If you're taking notes, circle it, underline it. Spanish in the Philippines. Spanish ships, okay, now Spanish, not Portuguese. Spanish ships become the first to circumnavigate the globe when the government sponsored the voyage of who? Ferdinand Magellan. Okay, now we're in Spain, Spanish. Now, side note, Magellan actually dies on this voyage. He dies in 1522. However, one of his ships is going to make it around the world, proving that the Earth could be circumnavigated. That's 1522. Spain is going to annex the Philippines in 1521 when Magellan's fleet arrives. The Spanish return in 1565 and they conquer the Philippines. Philippines are going to become a Spanish commercial center. Now, many Philippines there, they actually end up converting to Christianity. So the conversion thing went a little better for them than in Japan, for sure. Okay. Next topic, underline it. Circle it if you're taking notes. The lure of riches, right? Money. Everyone's trying to get paid here, right? Columbus, the Spanish, the English, other explorers, they had practically given up on exploring the Americas for a century. Why? There's no money in it. There was no money there. All these fairy tales of all this gold, and no, it wasn't happening. European interest in the Americas gets kind of rekindled when the Spanish come into contact with the two major empires in the region. Number one, the Aztecs in Mesoamerica. Think of Tenochtitlan, Mexica, right? And number two, the Incas in South America. This is a game changer. The incentive is now real. It's provided because these empires actually have gold and they have silver. This is going to make exploration what they want it to be all along, profitable. Now we're going to make money. Now we can do this. Now it's not such a shot in the dark. Now they know we can make this work. And then with Native American and African slaves, they can grow wealthy by raising sugar, tobacco, and other valuable crops. And then silver, they're going to find a major consumer and a customer for the silver. It's going to be somebody, if you remember back in, what was it, topic like 3.1, somewhere in there. I think I talked about how China's going to tell, like Europe, Great Britain, I think specifically, yeah, we really don't need you, bro. You need us more than we need you. Well, that's going to change because China is going to become a major consumer of silver that's coming in from the Western Hemisphere. So that's changing. Large Spanish ships called galleons are going to bring silver to the Philippines. They're going to trade for silk, spices, gold bullion, and other goods. So, what we got in the Americas, we're going to bring it over here. We're going to trade it for things that you have that they don't have over there, right? China, they're going to start using silver as a main form of currency. And by the early 17th century, silver became a dominant force in the global economic system. Then you're going to get French, English, and Dutch explorers. They're going to start searching for a northwest passage, a route around North America that could lead to East Asia and all the trade in spices and luxury goods. Northwest Passage. So you hear that a lot, but we know exactly what is the Northwest Passage. Okay, from the European Northern Atlantic perspective, this is the sea route to the Pacific Ocean through the Arctic Ocean along the northern coast of North America via, different waterways. You're going through like the Canadian Arctic, series of islands, archipelago. I don't say that word right. But like through this archipelago, can we get access to the Pacific Ocean? It's going to be discovered, like an icebound northern route is discovered in 1850. It's actually an Irish explorer, Robert McClure. But then they found a more southerly opening in an area explored by a Scotsman, John Ray, in 1854. And then a Norwegian, Roland Amundsen, he's going to make the first complete passage, but this isn't until 1903, 1906, in that era. But that's the Northwest Passage. Again, all these things is trying to get access to other markets in other parts of the world. Okay. I don't want to get too sidetracked with Northwest Passage, but at least I have an understanding of what it is. Next topic, circle it, underline it, French exploration. In the 1500s and the 1600s, the French government is going to sponsor expeditions in search of a Northwest Passage. Explorers like Jacques Cartier, Samuel de Champlain, they're going to fail to find the Northwest Passage. But they're going to realize there were valuable goods and rich resources available in the Americas. So they're thinking maybe we don't need to find Northwest Passage to Asia. There's plenty of stuff here where we're at. And there's other things that are going to come with this. So it wasn't, a total failure. Samuel de Champlain, he's going to be the founder of Quebec. And again, a little side note, some local history. He's considered the first European to ever set foot in Detroit. Okay, and then the French, they also hoped to find gold, but they didn't. But this is, we can't get sidetracked. But there's tons of Detroit history here with the French coming over here. But that's another topic for another time. But they found a ton of money in a land rich in furs, right? From walking distance from our school, the Detroit River, big money, bro, in the fur trade. Actually, the trading posts, the town, Quebec, where he forms, that's what they were doing. But the French, they had this thing, they rarely settled permanently. And this had a lot to do why they got along better with the Indians than the Spanish or the English. If you remember, you should have learned about the French and Indian War. Does that make sense? Does that bring back some memories? U.S. history, maybe middle school. The fur trade. The French had a little different take. Like the Indians didn't like the Spanish or the English. They found them, arrogant, rude, condescending. The French were more like down with the Indians. They kind of like they showed respect to them. They actually kind of partied with them. And how can I say this? They started families together. And so the Indians and the French got along really well, and it helped the French in a lot of ways. The English and the Spanish kind of came in like, your religion's stupid, our religion's correct. And, oh, by the way, God wants us to take your land away from you. It's not really your land, see? It's our land, even though we just got here, because God said so. And then the Indians were like, yeah, your God said so, bro. Not ours. Then the Spanish, they're not partying with them like the French. They're not starting families with them like the French. They're like trying to enslave them. Originally, the Europeans thought, hey, the Indians that are here, and I say Indians because, this side note, I worked with a guy that was, native, quote unquote, Native American. And he let me know right away, man. Him and his tribe, he was actually the chief of his tribe. We called him chief, actually. He was a real chief. And he said, man, we hate being called Native Americans, man. We're Indians. I said, really? I'm like, he's like, yeah, man. He was like, I hate that. So from then on, I would say Indians. He goes, when you're teaching your classes, man, do me a favor, say Indian. I'm like, okay, cool. So that was an interesting perspective. All right. So what the French figured, what they learned is, hey, man, if we don't try to steal their land, if we don't rape their women, if we don't enslave their children and murder their families, they're kind of cool. Go figure. So the French kind of had a much better attitude towards the Indians. Okay, so by 1754, the European population of New France, French colony in North America, was only about 70,000. The English colonies included 1 million Europeans. Okay, if you're taking notes, new topic, English exploration. Let's talk about the English for a bit. Circle that, underline it. English exploration. So let's settle, 1497. John Cabot comes to America. He's going to look for a Northwest Passage. Cabot claims lands from Newfoundland south of Chesapeake Bay. The English could not defend themselves against the Spanish naval forces. The Spanish were known for a great navy, Spanish Armada. And the British are not quite the kings of the sea yet, right? But in 1588, okay, almost 100 years later, the English destroy 2/3 of the Spanish Armada. With that victory, now England is going to become the major naval power and the main player in competing for land and resources in the Americas because of the British Royal Navy. 1607, Jamestown. Okay, this is something from U.S. history. Jamestown is going to become England's first successful colony in the Americas. Jamestown was in Virginia. The first colonies, by the way, in the present-day U.S. were actually Spanish settlements in Florida and New Mexico. Just a side note. Okay, draw a line. Next topic. Dutch exploration. Now we're talking about the Dutch. 1609, they're going to send Henry Hudson to explore the east coast of North America. And again, did not find the Northwest Passage. The Dutch would claim the Hudson River as well as the island of Manhattan. And on the tip of that island, they settled a community. It was called New Amsterdam. Have you ever heard of New Amsterdam? Well, New Amsterdam, it's modern-day New York City. But like many port cities, New Amsterdam flourished because it was located where a major river flowed into an ocean. So, this is the geography of it. Makes sense. A river that flows into an ocean, that's money all day, right? That's getting goods out there and getting goods in. Imports and exports. That's access. Okay, next topic. Draw a line, circle this. Comparing transoceanic voyages. We're talking circa 1300 to circa 1800. There's a chart on page 204, okay? And this chart does a good job going over some of the things we talked about today. It organizes it very well. I'm just going to go over it with you right now for the podcast. So let's talk about China. Explorer, Zheng He. Key voyages, India, the Middle East, and Africa. The purpose? To open up trade networks with India, Arabia, Africa, and to spread Chinese culture. The impact of this? China decided not to continue exploring. Okay, next sponsoring empire, England. Explorer, John Cabot. Key voyages, North America. Purpose? To find a sea route to the east, going west from Europe. The impact of this? They're going to claim land in Canada for Britain, and they're going to establish a shorter, more northerly route across the Atlantic than Columbus's route. The next sponsoring empire, Portugal. Vasco da Gama. Key voyages, west coast of Africa, right? He goes down, and he's going to come up around, and he's going to get to where? To India. The purpose? To open a sea route from Europe to India and China. And they're avoiding the Italian shakedown in the Mediterranean. The impact of this? Portugal expanded trade and cultural exchange between India and Europe. The next sponsoring empire, Spain. Christopher Columbus, right? He wasn't Spanish, right? He's Italian, but the Spanish put up the money, right? They're going to stake him. Christopher Columbus, key voyages, the Caribbean islands and Central America. And the purpose, they're going to find sea routes to India and China going west from Europe. The impact? Spain led the European exploration and colonization of the Americas. They led it. Okay, and another one from Spain, Ferdinand Magellan. His key voyages, South America, the Philippines, demonstrate that Europeans could reach Asia by sailing west. That's a game changer. The impact? Spain established links between the Americas and Asia across the Pacific Ocean. Okay, that is topic 4.2. That's a big topic. A lot of stuff happening. And hopefully what you learn from reading the text and listening to this podcast can help you with contextualization, complexity, and all that good stuff on your DBQs, and get you some points on the multiple choice of your AP World History Modern exam. See you in the next podcast.